As you know, in television, many times we tape ahead of schedule, and I mentioned that before this segment because there are new developments happening on a daily basis, and even as we're discussing it now, there may be new things that you will hear about. But we wanted to take some time today to talk about the reaction in Silicon Valley to the George Zimmerman not guilty verdict regarding the death of Trayvon Martin. I invited Carl Ray to join us. He is an author and a performer who has written the book Cured, The Power of Forgiveness. And when Carl was a young boy, he witnessed his father being killed right before his eyes.
Daddy told him I was going away to college. Bill reached in his pocket, pulled out a gun, struck Daddy across the forehead. I hit Bill across the head with a Clorox ball. The three of us tumbled off the porch. As we held on to Bill, he raised his hand with the gun and cocked it, reached over, shot Dad in the chest 8 times. It happened that quick.
Carl, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this in context, because one of the things that you have shared is that your father's death at an early age shaped your entire life. And you at one point had to seek help and made a decision about what kind of career you would have based on this incident. So let's talk a little bit about what happened when you were a teenager that led to your father's death.
Okay, it was 1961, and I grew up in a little town called Butler, Alabama. And that afternoon, I said yes and no to a white man. In those days, that was considered disrespectful.
You didn't say yes, sir, and no, sir.
I didn't say yes, sir, and no, sir. So he beat me up. He almost killed me that afternoon. And about an hour later, still angry, came to my home. My father and I was sitting on the porch, and he walks over and said, "The boy got to leave. You don't know how to talk to white folks." And the last words my father said, he's going away to college. And I was going to go. My bags was packed. I was leaving for Tuskegee Institute the next day. That's when he pulled out a gun, struck him across the forehead, and I hit him with a small bottle. And as I held on to him, he shot him in the chest 8 times and killed him.
Incredible. Unbelievable. After that, how did your life change?
For the next 30 years, it was a nightmare. But immediately after that, they had a trial, which lasted about an hour. And as a result of the trial, it was deemed that it was justifiable. So they finally suggested that I be taken to the Mississippi line, thrown out of the state of Alabama, and not allowed back in until I learned how to talk to white folks. So he went free, and I had to leave town.
And you know, one of the reasons I invited you here today, and I should say that we invited someone from the San Jose Police Department to talk about racial profiling, because obviously the Zimmerman verdict has polarized so many people. It sparked outrage, and there have been people on both sides saying there was reasonable doubt, and many people have said, but this speaks to the fact that when it comes to African Americans in this country and racial profiling, there is not justice. That's been a lot of the reaction. Your reaction to the not guilty verdict, and what are your thoughts about what this means at this time in our nation?
They were going to do it because of the selection of the jury and the makeup that was set up there, but I was still hurt, and it's just surprising to see that the same thing is going on today that happened to me 51 years ago. Identical.
What do you hope people can take away from this? We've certainly heard from Trayvon's parents, and they have spoken out against the violence, and we know in some of those incidents it's not even the people who are peacefully protesting, it's others who come in to incite situations. But the president has spoken about the situation, the attorney general, and then there have been some reactions saying if the races were reversed, there would not be this further inquiry. The decision would rest. What are your thoughts about that?
I think if it had been, say, reversed, it wouldn't have been a problem. If it had been,
what do you mean it wouldn't have been a problem?
Say, for instance, if that had been a young white male walking with a hoodie, the guy saw him, it wouldn't have been a big thing. But because it was a black male, all of a sudden he became a threat.
What do you see now these days in terms of conversations? Your show tends to spark a lot of reaction. People share their own experiences regarding racism and also regarding healing. So what do you see? You said you see on the one hand that things haven't changed in certain ways. Where, if anywhere, do you see that things have changed?
Well, I saw things had changed, but they're slipping back. And I think one thing we need to do is have some dialogue about this and find out what good can come out of this. Because if we don't talk about it and deal with it, we're going to go backwards. And at some point, we have to say, okay, what can be done? What can we do? How can we cross dialogue so everybody can understand that, hey, this is a tragedy of America. This sets America back. This makes America look bad throughout the world. And there's been protests around the world for this. So somehow we need to come together, have some dialogue, and somebody needs to say, hey, let's see if we can make things change. And let's not slip back.
Do you see any of that happening in Silicon Valley?
In Silicon Valley, I've heard a lot of dialogue and talk. And one thing that I was very impressed with yesterday when Google had their protest. And,
The employees there.
The employees.
In their hoodies.
In their hoodies, the whole company, and paid tribute to Trayvon. And that says that the country is saying, hey, look, this is wrong. It shouldn't have happened.
And there should be some measures that really address, it's a tragedy all around, and especially it speaks to the need for difference. You write about the power of forgiveness. How did forgiveness play a role in your perspective on your father's death and your journey?
Well, my life changed 22 years later when I forgave the guy who killed my father. That was the most spiritual moment in my life, a release that freed me.
And what did you do specifically to forgive, and how was that communicated?
I met a stranger in Los Angeles who talked to me about forgiveness. Had no intention of forgiving the guy, and he kind of triggered some things, and I spoke about it, and he made me very angry that he would even ask me to forgive the man who killed my father. And during my anger, he said, I'll make a deal with you. You don't have to mean it, but if you let me hear you say the words. Now, I had no intention of forgiving the guy. I was angry. But when I said the words, everything just went away.
Amazing.
Spiritual peace, it was beautiful.
Wow. And on that note, Carl, I want to say that I'm going to invite you back because we want to talk more about this power of forgiveness and the application of it in many areas of life. But thank you for being here today, and thank you for sharing your thoughts
Oh, thank you for
regarding
having me.
this verdict.
Mm-hmm.